Welcome to the EVOLVE Voices podcast, a platform to hear about the fascinating stories behind the people that power global commerce. I'm your host, Jade Maravillas, GTM advisor, and your Asia and Europe host of EVOLVE Voices. My next guest is one of the OGs of global digital commerce. Prakash Gurumoorthy has had an impressive career spanning several decades and continents and hundreds of award-winning digital commerce transformation projects. He was previously the managing director and one of the co-founders of Born Group, a global digital agency which pioneered connecting commerce, creative, and content for some of the world's leading brands. He is now the general manager of EMEA and APAC for VTEX, a publicly listed digital commerce platform for enterprise retailers, where he is tasked to lead the business in its new growth markets. In this episode, Prakash shares stories, insights, and learnings from over 600 digital transformation projects in scaling businesses from zero to unicorn status. He also talks about why effective marketing is about how it makes you feel, and that storytelling in commerce is shaped by three key critical experiences: brand experience, behavioral experience, and the book of record experience. Hope you enjoy listening to this as much as I did recording it. But for now, here's Prakash Gurumoorthy. So Prakash, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you have a packed schedule as usual. It seems like you're always on an airplane, being based in India, but also looking after, a global remit. Funny enough, we have known each other for a long time, but in different capacities. So when I was working at WorldPay, we met through Born, which is one of the companies that you co-founded. We'll talk a lot about that today. But then after that, I moved to VTEX. And then after I left VTEX, you joined VTEX. So it's such a small world. And when we were catching up before this call, you told me your insanely impressive story that goes way, I don't want to age you, but it goes way back when the dot-com bubbles first started and you got really involved with e-commerce very early on.
Definitely. It just makes me think that I've come a long way, but it's fascinating to see how technology is growing and how you got to learn on every step that you do. So my journey into the e-commerce space was quite an accident. Actually, a couple of my classmates from my school, they wanted to start a .com shop along with a product company way back in 9. And when I finished my MBA, I was working with GE for some time, and that was during the Jack Welch, Scott Bayman days. And I got this accidental call from my classmates early 2000 about joining them in this venture where they were servicing .coms because there was a big .com wave and they also had this product company. And I took a risk of getting into that area. And it was very fascinating because we rode the wave of .com during those early days. And I remember we had this massive Swedish client who actually were teaching English. They had a .com site which was actually teaching English for the Chinese market, and they were making over $100 million, and they were transitioning the e-commerce, migrating the e-commerce platform to a new platform, and it was on 26 load balancers, VJ++, custom built software and things like that. And during those days, you will imagine there were a lot of clients who were ready to pay even $3 million for a static website, anything that you get a .com, and it was all custom built e-commerce platforms, right, on .NET. .NET was just coming up during those days, or Java and the like. So we rode that .com wave, and I was very fortunate enough to have built a lot of custom built e-commerce platforms during that time, right? Whether it's B2C, B2B exchanges, marketplaces, and things like that. And the one thing that I always wonder when a CIO or a CMO asks me, hey, Prakash, should we build or should we buy? And this question always comes up in every buying decision. It's actually the same, right? Because the platform is not the silver bullet. The silver bullet is how can you enable and facilitate the GMV or the business objective. So I must say, I was very fortunate to get into that life cycle. I was the chief operating officer of that startup. We were there. I continued for about 8 years, pretty much built it from zero to $250 million valuation. When I exited today, it's more than $2 billion valuation. And that was the era of like Web 1.0, .com and web apps, right? So we had the .com crash, and then we had to move to the next piece of web apps, right? I'm sure you must have heard about intranets and extranets. So during that time,
For sure.
so we were building
I'm not that
we were
young.
building those intranets and extranets and things like that. And then of course there was that era of mobile apps which came up, and so we kind of did the transition. So in that journey, one of the things that I learned was always about intersecting technology and business, because I think that was the key. And how do you kind of get the e-commerce platform up and running to get the revenue, right? Like that was one of the core principles that we were working on. For about 8 years, I built this startup to a good state, and then I realized that it was time for me to learn enterprise IT, because one of the things that I always realize is when I connect the dots backwards, you can always offer a very good brand experience. You can offer a very good behavioral experience with channels. But if you don't understand the book of record, you'll always fall short. And the book of record is very critical in terms of what's your ERP, what's your CRM, what's your data book of record, how do you create a data warehouse. Today we call it data lake. We are talking about AI agent and things like that. But back in the days, it's about having this master mammoth database and creating a data warehouse. So I was always curious about understanding the enterprise landscape. So I moved to the US with a company called Cognizant. And I was involved in managing an enterprise IT landscape for a pharmaceutical company called Merck, which is one of the largest pharma company in the US. Again, fortunately, I was involved in managing the entire enterprise ecosystem of SAP. Over $800 million of orders were getting processed through SAP, downstream to TIPCO, upstream to the business apps of Merck. It was quite fascinating for me to link the brand experience with the book of record experience, because what we see as brand experience is the facet of the consumer piece of IT. But in the back end, it's a lot more complicated in terms of making sure that that ecosystem or the truth, the master of truth resides in. Whether it's customer, it could be CRM, whether it's accounting or finance, that could be the ERP, or whether it's data, that's the data warehouse and things like that. And in that journey, I was there for about 5 years. And even in the first .com, I was shuttling between US and this was like being there in the US. And fortunately, I got called by a private equity company called True North, and they were building a firm that was in the intersection of marketing and technology. And I immediately lapped it because it was very fascinating to look at a vision where, if you look at advertising agencies, they're always shy of looking at integrations and things like that. They offer a great brand experience, they do a great storytelling, but they don't get involved heavily into integration. And if you look at technology services companies, they're very good at integrations, but they're not very good at creating a user persona or a user journey for a particular brand. So our vision for Born was to be in the middle of marketing and technology, whereby we look at three types of specialism, which is creative UI UX. So you take a brand, how can you offer a spectacular brand experience? So if you take Ferragamo, you look at mapping out the user personas for Ferragamo. You look at mapping out the user journeys. You look at mapping out the type of workflow that a consumer looks at Ferragamo.com. And then you look at the behavioral experience, which is where the person is going to shop by the user persona. Is he going to shop in the store? Is he going to shop using a call center? Is he going to shop through the web, through the mobile, and the likes? And finally, last but not the least, the e-commerce platform. So when we started Born, we were very clear that we don't want to do custom built e-commerce platform. So we kind of combine creative UI UX content, which is all about photography, video, copy, text, and animation. And then we combined it with an e-commerce platform, which could be the 15 platforms that existed in 2012. That was a very interesting journey. Again, I must say I'm using this word frequently. I was fortunate enough to do over 600 plus e-commerce digital transformation experiences. Some of it are, I take a lot of pride because if you take, I don't know, you must have flown to Shanghai Airport. We partnered with Shanghai and we built iShop Shanghai, which is a great platform to cater the 6 millions of visitors who come to the airport daily. And if you look at the site, right, it's an amazing architecture where we look at catering to the travelers and the non-travelers. Similarly, we did it for Digi Telecom, part of Telenor Group in Malaysia. And these are some of the pivots that we did in Asia, in North America, or in Europe, which is quite interesting. Like any PE journey, you had to kind of sell the company. So we sold Bond Group for 14 EBITDA multiples, which was very good return for the investors. We sold that to Tech Mahindra just before COVID, late 2019. And I was part of the transition team and we integrated the business fully with Tech Mahindra. I must say today that Bond Group independently exists within Tech Mahindra, even though it's part of Tech Mahindra. They have not removed the branding of Bond because of the fact that there's a lot of CMO equity associated with the agency set up like Bond. And post that, I was fortunate enough to meet Mariano, who's the CEO of VTEX, way back in late 2021. Mariano wanted a leader who could build emerging markets. And then I met the extended team, Santiago, Lex Sunsini, Geraldo, and the whole team of VTEX. So I embarked on a different journey. There's nothing related to services, but more on a public SaaS platform for brands and retailers. Today, if you look at VTEX, we are creating like a open public SaaS model for brands and retailers with a low total cost of ownership. So I today take care of Europe and Asia, but it's been a fascinating journey, building 2 companies, pivoting on the enterprise IT landscape, and then connecting the dots. So overall, it is quite enriching. And I must say that whatever you know today or whatever I know today is obsolete tomorrow. With the advent of agentic AI and the co-pilots and things like that. So it's a great field to be in, right?
So first of all, wow. I mean, I felt like I was being taken on a couple of decade journey there. Before we talk about VTEX, I wanted to focus a little bit about your journey, both at your previous ventures, so Born and your other one. As I mentioned, we met when you were at Born, and you touched a little bit about it there when you were talking about what the USP of Born was. But I think it shouldn't be underestimated. I feel like Born was really one of the first system integrators, one of the first digital agencies that really focused on delivering excellent customer experience with technology. And that's one of the reasons why when I was a partner manager, I really wanted to engage with you guys because we were targeting luxury retailers and you worked with a lot of them because you knew that it's paramount to deliver those seamless customer experiences. And I was talking to another podcast guest and we were talking about the way that you actually deliver these flawless customer experiences takes a lot of back-end engineering, right? So I wanted to touch on that first. But anyway, going into your previous experiences, you don't really go from 0 to 250 million and going from 0 again to selling to Tech Mahindra for 14x multiple without overcoming some bumps in the road. So can you give us a couple of examples as to some challenges that you've come across in your remarkable journey and how you were able to overcome it? Or if not, then what were the learnings from it?
Well, when you build 2 companies from zero, from nothing to something, you always have bumps on a daily basis. You're kind of building the engine or the foundation, as they say. And as Jim Collins says, right, in his seminal work, Built to Last or Good to Great, I would crystallize some of the challenges in 2 to 3 compartments, right? Like, and it's easy to categorize that way because there are many challenges, and this 40 minutes or 1 hour will not be enough, right? But if you have to categorize and compartmentalize, right, the first challenge we always encounter in this journey is how do you get the right people on the bus? For us, I think that's super critical, right? Like the organization design is very, very critical, and a lot of times it's underestimated, right? Like there's a type of people that you need from your $0 to $10 million journey. There's the type of people you need from your 10 to 20, and there is a type of people you need from 20 to 50, and then 50 to 100. Of course, there is a type of people who will be with you from 0 to 100 and from 100 to $1 billion. But I think it's very important to recognize that difference, because one of the assumptions is people are always going to be elastic is something that that gets challenged and questioned, right? Because a lot of times in companies, people just expand their roles without adequate upskilling and without adequate intervention. So there is always this feeling that, okay, you're quite smart because you moved it from 0 to 10. So you automatically assume you're smart to move it from 10 to 50. Then you assume that you're smart to move it from 50 to 100. And then you assume that 100 to 1 billion, oh my God, I did it already. So it's not a big deal. The ability to recognize this trap, because it's a trap, right? And you got to kind of like not fall into this trap, is very critical. So the first compartment or first challenge is always looking at how do you acquire the right talent, and how do you retain the right talent? How do you develop the right talent? And how do you kind of sustain the right talent? And that's very important learning for us, because you got to build the culture of the company along the way. It doesn't matter whether you're a $1 billion company or a $1 million company or a startup. As you start the company, you got to define what's your ethos, what's your culture. And that ethos will kind of determine the vision of the company. And it's okay even if you don't have a customer, but it's very important to have that purpose and the ethos. So that's learning number one for me personally, because we did not have that initially. And then when you build it in the middle, you will have different interpretations for that ethos. And then you will have different consistencies on talent acquisitions and different type of talent acquisition, different type of talent retention. So it gets a little bit messy. And then correcting it at a later stage is a lot of hard work. I'm not saying it cannot be corrected, but it's a lot of hard work. So that's learning number one, challenge number one, personally, if you ask me, because I think that foundation team is very, very critical. Learning number two is, which I'm now mentoring a lot of product companies pro bono, but I always see that marketing is an integral part of creation. And this I can reiterate, this is part of my latest LinkedIn post of a Medium article, which described how Vincent Van Gogh painting went from $2,000 to $100 million plus, right? Because it's not just the creation of the Van Gogh painting, but it's about how do you incorporate marketing as a part of the art. So I always believe that you can have an amazing product. You can have an amazing microservices first, AI first, robotic automation. Like you can use disruptive cutting edge technology. But the key is how do you incorporate marketing as a part of your creation? Because I think that's very, very important. And it's all about how do you position? How do you do the storytelling? How do you kind of narrate your value propositions? Because today we are living in a cluttered world. So today morning, I was actually trying to get into a partnership with a company, and the company does some physical and digital store locator or concierge service model with a product, with a SaaS AI native product. But then my question to the founders were, what's your positioning? What's your storytelling? What's your narrative? Because there are like 100 plus store locator apps, or there are like 200 plus content syndicators or like 500 plus concierge services. So the biggest learning that I had in this build-up was how do you look at I reiterating the message? And I'm so happy when you say about Bond because that did not happen on day one. So we had to kind of like on day one, our messaging was quite bad. So we had to kind of
What was it? Out of curiosity, what was your day
our
one
day one
messaging?
messaging was we do creative UI UX, which is a separate service. Then we do content, which is photography, video. Sorry, we do content production and content creation. We do creative UI UX, and then we do commerce. Our day one messaging was like isolating all these three as individual services to a particular brand. Now, if you go to a CMO, he's not going to look at it like as independent entities because he's looking at an agency that can do the entire digital transformation and not just look at, okay, I need to look at creative UI UX or he doesn't, a CMO doesn't care about a commerce platform, honestly, right? Like he cares about conversions. He cares about like personalization. He cares about the user journey. He cares about the customer NPS. So when we started on day one, it was very different, right? Like we were trying to position it independently. We were positioning the commerce platform services to the CIO, the content and creative services to the CMO, and a mix of something to the CDO, right? It was kind of like a funny thing. And then we had this digital wheel. So we used to call it as attract, interact, transact, and react. We had that second level of storytelling. We had a great wise guy as the CEO for Bond, Dilip Keshu. I mean, Dilip was like very, very good at creating this. Dilip was very good at creating some part of that storytelling. So we had a different type of storytelling from phase one to phase two, which is all about attracting a particular brand, interacting with a brand, transacting for a particular brand, and reacting. So we created like a digital wheel. That was level two. Then level three, we had to iterate again, which is like, what are your 10 C's of digital transformation? So when you kind of create your positioning, we have to be very clear. It's not vaporware. You need to have very strong capabilities and your positioning should be a part of the creation. It's not just, okay, I'm doing marketing and forget it, it's a vaporware. No, it's marketing with solid capabilities that's there. So I think that's something I would reiterate, which is compartment two. A lot of companies have solid capabilities, but they don't have good marketing. A lot of companies have great marketing, but they don't have solid capability. So, it's integral learning for us, which is like, you can have great capabilities, but you need to position it correctly. And most importantly, we were very clear about what to do and what not to do. That's the third learning, right? Because we could do a lot of custom built e-commerce work. We could do a lot of ERP work. We could do a lot of CRM work. We had a lot of inquiries, but we were very clear that we cannot go away from the ethos of what we stand for, which is like, your whole digital transformation. Same like VTEX, right? VTEX could do a lot of other things, but VTEX is very clear that we will only do digital commerce for the last 23 years and we'll keep doing that. So that core competency of what you can do well and what you cannot do well, very important learning. And the fourth part is classic business fundamentals, which is like, hey, you got to be profitable as a business. If you're not profitable, I think there are some hard decisions that you need to take along the way. And how do you look at customer lifetime value, right? It's all amazing words, but I do remember that we had customers in Bond starting at $500. They started with $500 as a revenue. And over a period of like 1 year, they gave us $2 million. So you can never estimate a customer value based on the purchase order or the work order. You have to be very clear about what value you're bringing to the customer. And we always had a saying that it's not how you start, it's how you kind of end with a particular customer. So I think those are some of the learnings that we had. We almost had a lot of 90% of our customers be thrilled about the work that we did. And out of the 600 digital transformations that we did, we won awards for 500 plus brands. So we had our customers receiving the awards, and that's kind of like a very good validation of how we did the work, right?
That's really good. So let me just summarize what you said there. So first is finding and attracting and retaining the top talent. And I've also seen it happen so many times where you come from smaller teams when you're a startup and you have such a really strong culture of camaraderie just because it's much easier with a smaller team. But then once you start scaling into the millions and hundreds of millions in terms of revenue, it gets to be challenging to actually retain that sort of culture. So it's really paramount as a leader to add your business fundamentals, what you're really generating in terms of revenue and how that relates to the people that are helping you along the way. So that's step one. And then I think the next thing that you mentioned was that marketing is paramount to the success of a business, which is really refreshing to hear as a marketer, because not a lot of companies think that way, right? I feel like there's a lot of companies that have on their board finance people, operations people, but not a lot of marketers. I feel like people, when you talk about marketing, everyone just thinks, oh, it's a team that spends a lot of money, right? But in reality, we tend to forget that marketing, the root word of market, is understanding who your customer is. And also relating to the third point that you mentioned, understanding what your value proposition is, what your differentiators are. You mentioned that with Born, your day one messaging, which we kind of laughed about, but actually you already had the building blocks of what eventually became Born's core value proposition. It was already there from day one, but it's just a matter of understanding how you can relate that product or service proposition into what the customer really wants. And that's where I feel like a lot of companies miss that translation. Other tech companies that I work for, we like talking about ourselves a lot and sometimes miss that actually by talking about ourselves, we disengage with the person who we're talking to, who is the customer. And then lastly, as you mentioned, understanding the true business fundamentals and making sure that the customer satisfaction is tantamount to this experience. One of the things that I gathered from what you said as well is that you see a lot of companies that invest in top of the funnel customer acquisition, but forget that they have existing customers that they can serve. We see this a lot in tech. There's a lot of focus on new business sales, but then CX kind of falls into the wayside. You also mentioned a couple of times now you've had 600 digital transformation experiences when you were at Born, and quite a bit of that were award-winning for your customers. In the last 600 or so tech digital transformations, can you give us maybe one or two learnings from those? Because I'm pretty sure, especially with the advancements in technology every year, or it feels like every month, there's something new, right?
There are many, because we started off in this journey of building an agency in 2012. And 2012 were the rise of the monolithic platforms, right? Like, we had all these monolithic big platforms that were not acquired by SAP or Adobe or Salesforce. I mean, they were independently operating. And of course, you had the new age platforms coming, the Mark II certified platforms like VTEX or Commerce Tools or what have you, way later in 2016, 2015 and the likes, right? From our perspective, when you look at these type of transformations, I think one of the important learning, which at least I have laughed at this with a lot of CEOs, CMOs and CIOs, is 90% of the time, when you look at a digital transformation, it is still considered that selecting an e-commerce platform is a silver bullet. And this is like a huge, myth, because, the e-commerce platform is one of the many, many things that can enable your business objective, right? Like it's almost like a foundational layer. And then you kind of build your merchandising capability, you build your pricing strategy, you build your business intent, like how John Lewis did from an omni-channel perspective, or how Shangi is doing from an onboarding tenants in the airport and things like that. So the ability to manage the business with the foundation layer is very critical, and not necessarily just the foundation layer, because the foundation layer is not going to increase your GMV, right? Like I think like and I can quote some examples, right? Like we did a multi-million dollar contract with a large multi-department retailer globally, and we incorporated assisted selling way back in 2014 for this brand. You know, the concept of assisted selling, as you very well know, is all about like when you go to the store, this brand had about 500 stores. When you go to a particular store, you don't get the size. Let's say you're looking for a shirt of size M. You don't get the shirt of size M, but you like the color, you like the pattern, you like the style. And the store executive can actually create an account for you, and he can check the inventory in the nearest store, and he can order it for you, or he can like ship it for you. So what does it mean from a technology perspective? You can check the inventory, you can check the store, you can actually do assisted selling. You can also combine physical and digital, right? Like, and that's what we have today in VTEX, a module called Sales App. But way back, it was called assisted selling module, right? Which is kind of like quite unique. And we implemented that, and the whole implementation was amazing. We had a great go live, and just as a metric, this brand was doing 10% of its sales online. The 90% was offline, right? Like, so there was a big omni-channel push. Everything was great. The customers liked it. It was awesome. Then I always like to do pre and post trial. Right. And what I mean by pre and post trial, one of the things that I really like doing is when I acquire a customer, I like to be a consumer for that particular brand. I want to kind of purchase. I don't mind spending, like I'll use my credit card and I'll just go and buy something. And I want to see what works well as a consumer with them right now, and what has changed after they migrate to VTEX or they migrate to some other platform. What has changed? So I went, after we went live for this brand, I went to the store, the physical store, and I took a shirt. It's not my style shirt, but I took a shirt, and I saw that they did not have M, which was great because that's the use case I was looking at. And I called the store executive and I said, hey, can you get me an M on the shirt? I know that the functionality exists because he can check the inventory, he can order the size M from the nearest store, and he can order it on my behalf. And surprise, surprise, he actually answered to me that I don't have shirt size M. I said, but you can order it for me. He said, no, I can't order it for you. You need to go to the other store and pick it up. I said, can you check whether it's available on the other store? He said, no, I can't do that. I said, okay, no problem. Do you know that there is an e-commerce site, www. this? He said, yes, we know, but we are not, we are only incentivized in the store. We are not incentivized for the online sales. I said, okay, no problem. Then I asked him, do you have any kiosks or anything where it's advertised that people can go to the store? He said, no, you go to the other side in the back of the store. When you go towards toilet, there's a poster that says, if you want to check out the product, you can go and check out www. I asked him, do you know the value of that www thing? It's like multi-million dollars of license and platform implementation. But I'm saying this.
It must have been like, why is this person so invested
No,
in
I'm
this?
saying this
I mean,
with a
most people would just
lot
walk away.
of humor here, but this is like ironical fundamentally because I think when I dug deeper with a lot of executives, I think it's about the hybrid incentives, right? And as Goldratt, as Eliyahu Goldratt, I don't know whether you have read Goldratt, as Eliyahu Goldratt says, a lot of times people behavior will be based on how they are measured, right? Like, if you take professional executives or professionals, their behavior is completely based on how they are measured. So what I found is, while there is a humor in the story, what I found is the store people are not incentivized for online sales. So they don't care about whether it's omni-channel or whatever, right? Like for them, they are incentivized on the product that are going out of that particular shelf or whatever it is, right? Or maybe not. So when you look at these type of learnings, it's very important to prioritize your blueprint or your MVP, because a lot of times your MVP kind of becomes very utopian, because you always say, okay, I want this, I want that, but probably it might not get used. The second interesting technology insight that I heard from the largest telecom player in Malaysia when I was speaking with the CDO was they spent a lot of money with the platform, with us. We went live, amazing launch, everything was good. Then I was having lunch with the CEO and the CDO in Malaysia on a sunny day, and he said that, Prakash, you won't believe we took about 14 months to launch the platform with you. We are very happy. But 60% of what we launched are not used by the customers. I said, how did you find it? He said, I'm a marketer by nature, so I use some performance marketing measures. I did A/B testing. I'm looking at the pages. I'm looking at what is getting used by the consumers, and 60% of what we have done is not even touched, is not even opened by the consumer. I said, wow, okay, that's a great learning, because and that was an MVP release, by the way. So I actually went deeper with him and I said, hey, can you categorize in the use case when you write the user stories? Can you add a column in Jira whether it is used by the consumers or not? He said, absolutely. I think that's something that I'm going to do it going forward. So you have many stories like this, but I think the crystallization of this is a lot of times when you look at buyers or procurement team or customers, a lot of times we tend to give a lot of importance to the e-commerce platform, or a lot of importance to the fact that the e-commerce platform is going to drive the revenue. I'm saying that yes, it will drive revenue, but it's a foundational element of the whole journey. The bigger pieces have to be taken care. Like, for example, how much are you spending on campaigns? How much are you putting on digital marketing? How much are you looking at merchandising mix? How much are you looking at pricing mix? What's your omni-channel strategy? What's your purpose-led marketing? Because there are like 30 shoe brands today, 300 shoe brands. Like, why would somebody want to buy a Adidas or a Nike or whatever? So I think it's very important to keep the relative weightage for a particular platform in that particular place. Otherwise, you tend to miss the bigger picture, right?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of companies expect that if you build it, they will come. So you invest a lot in your e-commerce implementation and then just go, oh, we're going to do our big launch. And then just expect that without proper, let's say, sales enablement or customer enablement, that it's just going to happen. But there's a lot more that is you're exactly right, that it's very foundational. There's a lot in terms of service and marketing that needs to go into it to be able to really generate that return on investment. So let's shift gears a little bit. And you mentioned it a few times earlier in this conversation, but I also remember from our previous conversation when we were planning for this, you have like a few principles that you've gotten from your decades of experience, especially with Born, that foundational
frameworks,
elements
yeah,
of storytelling. Yeah, exactly. That then relates to how customers and brands interact. So you have let me try to remember. You have your brand experience, you have your behavioral experience, and you have your book of record experience. So can you dive a little bit more about what each of those means in relation to storytelling in general? But it's also a good time to talk about VTEX. I mean, I'm familiar with VTEX. I worked there and had fantastic experience working there. But for some people, especially those listening in APAC and Europe, they may be less familiar about the platform than in Latin America. So a couple of things. Talk about these elements and how that relates to how you're positioning the platform today.
Absolutely. And again, don't get me wrong. This is like, I always say this, right? If you are able to explain a complicated topic in a very simple way, you've always achieved the objective, right? Because there are different narratives to digital transformation. I keep like couple of simple frameworks for a brand. One of the framework I always say is the whole digital wheel. for a particular brand. Let's say you're a B2C brand or a B2B brand. Your four components in the digital wheel. You got to attract your customers. That's the first component. You got to interact with your customers. That's the second component. You got to transact. You got to give a framework for them to transact, which is VTEX or any other platform. And then the fourth component is React. You should give a framework for your customers to react. Now, if you triage the simple concept into like the type of experiences a particular brand would want to offer, the first level, it's similar to a three-tier architecture and technology, right? Like the first level is called the brand experience, where you look at what type of experience you want to give it to the customer. It doesn't matter where the customer is coming from. The customer can come from the web, mobile, or store or kiosk. But what type of experience you want to give? So you know that very well. Like when you look at a brand like Marks and Spencers, they give a certain type of experience. When you look at a brand like Walmart, they give a different type of experience. When you look at a brand like Nordstrom Rack, they give a different type of. So that's the first level, which is what type of experience that you want to give as a brand, so that consumers can associate that particular experience. Right. And a lot of work gets into play there. It's all about your user personas, your user journey, your type of branding that you want to do, your storytelling there. Like Amazon's experiences, trust, convenience, and value. That's the brand experience that they want to give, right? Like it's convenience, trust, and value. So I want to give you that brand experience. So they don't want to give a Ferragamo experience. They're very clear. I'm giving you trust, convenience, and value. So that's the brand experience. The second type of experience is behavioral experience. Once you give the brand experience, then what is the behavior of the consumers that touch the brand? Is the behavior predominantly offline behavior? Is the behavior predominantly online behavior? Is the behavior hybrid behavior? So today there are 14 channels of record. You could come on the web, you could come on the mobile, you could look at a billboard, you could look at a printed brochure, you could call the call center, you could actually speak with a human being as a channel. I can go to a store, and if my experience with that particular store associate is good, I'll buy something. If my experience with that particular store associate is not good, I won't even come to the brand. So you get what I
or just to digress, there's a story about like the opposite of that. There was a woman who went into a shop and she was treated so badly because she looked like she couldn't afford any of the luxury goods from there. She went back and bought like the entire store, or at least like
it happens in luxury, right? Like they want to do a revenge shopping, or like I want to prove a point. So human being in the store is a very important channel in consideration. So how do you train that particular store associate for a good behavioral experience? So that is the second layer, which is behavioral experience. So your brand experience should be fully integrated with the behavioral experience. That's very important. The third experience, which is always overlooked, is the book of record experience, which is what is the type of ERP you have, what is the type of CRM you have, what is the type of data you have, and how do you combine that with the brand behavior and book of record, right? And when you look at VTEX, one of the things that we do, and just for people who don't know VTEX, we are like a 23-year-old digital commerce public SaaS platform that's modern, pragmatic, possible, and we operate in 43 countries. We have over 3,400 plus customers globally. We have operations pretty much in United States, Europe, APAC, Latin America, and Brazil, and we operate in 40 plus end markets. We are very strong in retail, electronics, healthcare, pharmacy, multi-departmental stores, and manufacturing, and banking, and the likes. When you look at VTEX, right, one of the things that we offer is a combination of all these three because of our modern composable platform, right? So the first is we offer a great brand experience because we have this fast store that creates modern headless store experiences for a particular brand. So you could build your own store, you could use your storefront, or you could use your headless stores, or you could use the content management experience within VTEX. So that's the first port of entry, which is the brand experience. VTEX by itself is an omni-channel platform. So you could actually use multiple channels in VTEX. You could go through the particular web. You could go through a mobile app. We have a PWA framework within VTEX. You could integrate with a call center. You could integrate with a printed brochure, digital brochure. You could actually integrate with the sales associate on the store, which is our sales app today. And you could integrate even with the people who are picking up your order, right? We have a product called Pick Pack in the warehouse department and the like. But more importantly, more than VTEX, as you could relate to the story, I think it's very important for a particular brand to take up a platform like VTEX, look at reducing the total cost of ownership, because that's what we are very particular about, because we offer B2C, B2B, marketplace, and order management. And put your money on other capital and operating expenses like marketing, digital marketing campaigns, merchandising, improving your omni-channel footprint, improving your pricing mix, and things like that, right? So that's kind of how it relates to at the end of the day. And last but not the least, I want to summarize with this whole the last framework that I find it very useful. And it's a framework by a Harvard professor called Sunil Gupta. And that framework is very simple, right? He says that if you look at a digital transformation, you're looking at four components, because he says that a digital transformation is not exactly a digital transformation. It's a business transformation. So the first is the business transformation. So when you look at a platform like VTEX, you're not looking at a digital transformation. You're looking at a business transformation, because you need to look at what type of returns are you looking at. You need to look at what's your availability to promise. You need to look at many, many factors. That's at a business level. The second is like, how do you look at your supply chain? Which is what exactly I said. Like you look at your business forecast for the next 10 years, then you look at your supply chain and operation. And the third layer is, how do you look at customer acquisition with in the digital transformation? How do you retain, acquire your customers? And the fourth is your organization design. How do you look at reinventing your organization with new talent or upskilling the existing talent? A lot of times, Jade, if you look at it, a lot of companies do very well in customer acquisition with a new platform. They do very well in supply chain and operations, but they sometimes miss connecting the business transformation to the other parts. And sometimes they miss the organization design, which is how do they need to create a coherent organization structure, right? Because a lot of times you look at a CMO, you look at a CDO, and you look at a CIO. It should be cohesive enough in a particular enterprise to make sure that we have the right transformative efforts that go on. Right? So yeah, that's kind of what VTEX tries to do with a lot of enterprises.
Great. And I think that kind of also summarizes what we've been talking about. So technology, and as you have seen it evolve and transform for the many years that you've been in it, has the power to really transform businesses and the way that customers interact with the business. However, that's really just one part of the equation. It really has to be looked at holistically as part of this business transformation. That's not just looking at digital, that is one component of it, but it's looking at the entire organization, from attracting, retaining talent to that culture, which is really paramount in making an organization a success. How you relate to your customers from the moment that you start speaking to them, acquire them, but also retain them. And then looking at it holistically from what you say, the book of record experience, right? So how all those different touch points relate to the data that is acquired through these relationships, and how you can use that to increase, your relationship, and that translates into increasing revenue for the company. So I learned so much. Thank you so much for the discussion. I really enjoyed this chat, and it's so nice to be reconnecting after all these years.
Same here. Pleasure is mine. And have a good one.
Now make sure you subscribe to Evolve Voices, this leading and incredible project where our ambassadors are interviewing amazing professionals from all over the world so they can share their perspective and benefit you with their perspective, their knowledge, and you can understand what's happening in the different markets. Evolve Voices is a project part of the Evolve Commerce Club, the #1 and leading community where we connect international professionals in the world of commerce. We are now connecting professionals in more than 40 markets, and every week we invite an expert to share their perspective and their knowledge. So if you'd like to know more, you can always look at the comments. We have a link there so you can request your application and stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks for watching. All the best. Ciao.